Hey everybody, welcome back to MyAndyBuck.com. I am here at King's Volkswagen in Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's quite a thrill for me to be able to interview a mentor of mine, a good friend of mine. His name is Gene Mullins. Gene and I worked together many years ago, back in 1996.
That's right.
Whew.
Yeah.
Wow, and actually in the same dealer group for many years. We didn't always work directly with each other, but we always worked with each other. Sometimes we were in competition with one another, and
But it was all good, right?
It was all good. It was all good. We always remained friends, and I am really thankful that you said that you would go ahead and interview with me today, because I think that there's a lot of wisdom that can come from you that a lot of people haven't heard about. So.
Well, thank you, Andy. That introduction means a lot, and I thank you for it sincerely. So.
Cool. Well, Gene, I know a lot about you from 96 on, and I know quite a bit about you from before that. Okay, just because of the stories.
Can you cut the camera off?
Yeah, we got to keep it PG. Okay, we got at least PG. No, I'm just kidding. But Gene, tell us a little bit about you. Like, where did you come from, and just tell a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so you know what? I was. I'll limit it to my career, if I may. I started out at a dealership in northern Kentucky. I'll tell you the story about. So when I started, I was a young guy, unsure what I wanted to do with my life. Needed some money. My wife was pregnant. I'd quit college, and my wife was pregnant, and I'd kind of muddled through for 8 or 9 months, and I made a decision. I got to do something else with my life. I need to make some money, and quick. So I started in the car business. A man offered me an opportunity, and the first day on my job, my wife had our first child.
Oh my goodness!
So I worked half a day, and I went in and told my boss at the time. I said, I got to go. My wife's having a baby, and the guy looking at me like, sure. He figured I was quitting like a lot of others did, right?
You'll never be back.
Yeah. So. And then I spent like 20 years of my life there in sales and other positions as well, F&I and sales management, of course. But that's where I started, and it was Ridgeview Lincoln Mercury, by the way. They were right under the bridge, and under the I-75, the Brent Spence Bridge, which, if you're from Cincinnati, you know what it is. If you're not, look it up, I guess, right? But
I think there's a Lexus River Center there now, isn't there?
That's what it is. Okay. Yeah, Lincoln Mercury went away, or at least Mercury did. The combination of Lincoln and Mercury went away, and now has just left with Lincoln only. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, so that's my story.
Great. So after 20 years, the guy was still waiting for you to quit, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So how long have you been in the business?
Actually, I've been in the business almost 40 years. I had a little bit of hiatus there for, you may or may not remember, but it's about 2001. I had some, I guess, a falling out with my GM at the time, and wanted me to do some things I wasn't really comfortable with. So I was summarily dismissed, but some say I quit, but I think it was,
It was just a mutual understanding.
Yeah, that's what it ultimately was, I guess.
Okay.
So,
what did you do during that time when you left?
I was in the mortgage business. I went, a friend of mine, 2 friends of mine tried to recruit me for a number of years to get into the mortgage business, and I decided to. And you know what? I did that for 4 or 5 years, and we did mostly just new house purchases. Mm-hmm. And being in finance, it would always it came easy to me because I was very familiar with finance in the car business.
Right.
So had some success there in that particular business. Built a business, but then the market crashed in that particular business, and most people who were working for a brokerage firm or the like ultimately just went out of business because the market totally went away. Excuse me.
Gotcha. So you got back in the car business.
And then, I decided to get back in the car business. The guy who summarily dismissed me called me up and said, hey, we'd like for you to come back and join our firm. So I had some reservations about it, but I knew that ultimately it would be easy for me at that time after working with him for a while. I was really, again, unsure about it, but I figured it would at least be a stepping stone elsewhere if I did take that job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
And it's kind of proof that in the car business you just don't know what's going to happen, right? You know, just when you think a bridge is burnt and it's never going to come back, yeah, it does.
Very, very
comes
true.
back around sometimes, and you always want to be kind to those as you go up the ladder, because coming back down, sometimes they're still there.
I burned, I burned a few bridges in this particular instance, but I was able to piece them back together and walk across. So.
There you go. That's all that really matters.
But you know what? One thing about, if I can just interject here with respect to that, what it demonstrates is the skills that you can achieve in this business and the level of success that you have. You can pick that up and take it to anywhere else and succeed because of what you learn. And you know what? You're an obvious example of that as we speak.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So let me ask you a question. You know, we always talk about people in the car business that, you know, they get in the car business, and believe it or not, I mean, I think you and I have actually had this discussion before, where they've been in the car business for 20 years, but they never really committed.
Yeah.
They never really,
Exactly.
I mean, they're always still looking for something different to do.
Exactly.
They don't want to admit that they're a car salesperson or that they're in the business, and they're always looking for that greener pasture, but yet it never comes along, and they continue on. And I think most of us kind of started out that way.
Exactly.
I mean, but some of us, it takes a very short time. So when was it that you decided that this was going to be your career? What was the tipping point?
Well, you know, as I referred to, you know, with my wife and our first child, you know, I had to pay off some debts because I didn't have any insurance. So once I got myself somewhat settled, I began to look at other positions. I had a brother-in-law who was a market maker on the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, invited me up here for a week of my vacation to learn that particular business. And I went up and I thought, I could probably do this. And so I saw the goings on there, and I started to take that path. But then I decided, you know what, I've invested a few years in this business. To answer your question, 4 or 5 years later, I finally made a decision. Hey, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be the best that I can be. So, you know, once you make, that's a critical decision that has to be made at some point. Doesn't have to be today, but, you know, just strive to be the best in whatever you do. So I made that decision, and then once I made that decision, then it became my profession rather than a stepping stone elsewhere. It became, you know, my profession. And then I studied. I would take seminars, whatever was available. I became an omnivorous reader of sales books. I just wanted to be the best, and I wanted to earn a lot of money along the way because it was all commission then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the path I took.
So did you spend a lot of money on your own training by yourself, or did the dealership pay for most of that?
You know what, oddly enough, initially I spent a lot of my own money. And the dealership, one of the things that made a big impression on me was, you know, we're here to talk really about some training and so forth. So we had these people that came around, and it was a trainer who had been 20 years in the business, and you know, you get a little negative about it. I think, what's this guy going to teach me, right? I mean, I've been doing this for a while. I think I know something. But so I took the class, and you know what? It was like incredibly eye-opening experience. You know, he was talking a whole different realm than what I was used to. You know, he was talking about different things that go on in people's mind about decision making before you even talk about the numbers. So it was eye-opening. I took that training. The dealership at that point in time paid for half of it. I was really reluctant to pay the other half because I didn't see any value, but when I came out of it, it was like career changing for me. So
Really?
I went from being just an average run-of-the-mill, typical of the ordinary salesperson to being at the upper echelon, and not only in both in terms of units, but in terms of earnings for myself. So
Gotcha. So a little bit of background on Gene. When I got into the car business, I started at Northgate Lincoln Mercury Volkswagen, and Gene became the sales manager there about 2 years after I was there. And it was kind of a funny situation because I was one of those salespeople that really I knew everything there was about the cars. In fact, I was a car guy. Okay, I knew cars. I knew the horsepower. I knew the torque. I knew everything about the cars. Really comfortable with that, and I really liked people. Most of the people thought that I was their grandson because I was selling Lincolns and Mercuries and Volkswagens, so they related that way, and I went ahead and related to them in that way. But one thing I could not do was close. I was not a good closer, and you made that very, very apparent by telling me, Andy, you're not a good closer.
Truth hurts us all sometimes.
Well, you know, it was something that I needed to hear because at that time, and I'm sure that it happens now on sales floors all over the United States, at that time, other salespeople would make fun of you if you couldn't close. In fact, they thought that, you know, a good salesperson was just a good closer, when really that's just one part of it. That's just one part of it.
I agree.
So when you came as a sales manager to Northgate Lincoln Mercury Volkswagen, we were kind of in a situation where we were underperforming. We were in an underperforming store, and you know, it kind of amazed me how that turnaround kind of happened. It didn't happen overnight. It did seem to happen rapidly, and I know it wasn't just you. There were other people in the mix. But you know, did you have a strategy, or what was your strategy when you came into that store? What was their mentality there?
Well, that's a great question. Reality was I did have a strategy, and my most important thing was to get people to believe in me and what I'm selling, if you will. And all I was really selling was the idea of how can we all get better, how can we all be a team, and how can we all you know, blow up together, if you will. So one of the most important things I felt at the time was to get people to believe in themselves. You know, not everybody can do this job. There's a lot of rejection. I mean, we're told no, no, no every day, or people, when we talk to people, they're not, a lot of times people aren't exactly forthright with us, right? They won't, people never say one of the hardest things I had learning was grasping was that people really didn't never say what they mean. And they would, you know, they would say this, but they mean that, you know. I'm just looking means I don't know you yet, Andy. I don't know if I can even trust you. Who are you? So I'm going to give you some smoke screens to keep you at your distance before, you know, I can connect with you. And that's what they do. So that was the type of knowledge I felt I had to impart to the staff to get them to believe in me so that we could move forward. But I really wanted to know people that, hey, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what you're doing. And this is an honorable profession, and it's a great life, and it's whatever you want to make of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more in that. I mean, it's been a phenomenal career for me. That's certainly not over. It's not over for you either, of course. And you know, it's funny because during that time when you made it very apparent that I wasn't a very good closer, one thing that I learned about you was that you were one of the best closers that I've ever met in my life. And you know, yes, you could sell cars, but there's a story that I often tell in my classes, okay? And I always pick on you in the classes. I guess your ears are burning probably sometimes, but there was one particular instance, and I remember the customer's name. I'm not going to say it because we're on video, but I remember the customer's name, and we're talking about 1997, 98, okay? Craziest thing in the world. So I've got this client of mine that's coming back off a lease. I was the leasing manager at the time. They're coming back off of their 2-year lease in a Tracer. And this fellow was a rather large gentleman, and the Tracer was pretty boxy, and the new Tracer was kind of curved. It was rounded, didn't have as much room in it. He didn't want that new Tracer. But we had the Mercury Mystique. And I said, you know, Larry, what you really want is this Mystique. And I said, let me show you this, and he wouldn't sit in it. I don't want the Mystique. I don't want to look at it. I want to see. I want a Tracer. I want a Tracer. And I spent about an hour with this gentleman and his wife, folks, trying to get him to just look at a Mystique. And the guy was like, Andy, I want to deal with you, but I'm going to go down the street. I'm going to go look at a Toyota. They got good leases. And I went into Gene, and I said, Gene, I said, you know, I got this guy, Larry and Marie, out here. Like I say, I remember their names like it was yesterday. And I said, you know, I've got them out here, and they really want this Tracer. And I said, you know, we don't have anything. We don't have the old body style Tracer. We've sold out of them. We couldn't lease them if we had them anyway. And he won't look at a Mystique. And Gene, you know, it's 8 o'clock at night, and he got this look on his face. And he walked out there, and he greeted him, and he said, hi, you must be Mr. and Mrs. Chalk. And I stood there for a minute. And so, for those of you who don't know, chalk is when you sell a car, you'd write it on the board. And back in the old days, you had a chalkboard, so you'd write their name on the board. And Gene occasionally, when he decided that he was going to sell somebody a vehicle, when a salesperson said they couldn't and there was no way, he would usually greet him as Mr. and Mrs. Chalk, and you knew that you were going to be there till about midnight, or you were going to sell a car, one of the two. So Gene goes out, talks to him for just a couple of minutes, and says, Andy, why don't you go grab the keys to this stock number here? Grab the keys to this stock number here and take Larry and Marie over across the street, because he said, I think we've got some previous body style tracers over there that they could use. Well, at the time, we were storing some cars across the street. And,
Church.
Yeah, no, at Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, at Chuck E. Cheese. We were storing some cars, but they were all Volkswagens. I knew what was over there. I knew where my inventory was. So Gene says, take them over there and show them those tracers. And I'm looking at him like, tracers over there? There's no tracers. And he's like, get this stock number and take them over there. So I get the stock number. Well, what do you think the stock number is, folks? Yeah, it's a Mystique. Okay. So I get the car. I pull the car up, put Larry and his wife in it. We drive across the street, drive around, and I say, I'm still oblivious, folks. I'm still like, I'm dense. I don't know. I was young. I don't get it. But this was an important part of my life. So we go over there, we drive around, and I say, I knew there weren't any tracers over here. And Larry goes, well, what kind of car is this? And I said, this is a Mystique. And he said, you mind if I drive it? And I said, no, not at all. So we switch seats, we go around, we drive back, we come back. We sold him a Mystique and delivered him a car. But, Gene, at that time, when we were there, he knew what needed to be done to sell a car. And he knew when a salesperson was doing all the right stuff, but also could teach them in a very teachable manner. And that's something that I always remembered about you. When I was working with you as a salesperson, I learned so much about closing. I always listened to every word you said, because you always had an angle on something. You were leading people to buy the car based on their thoughts. Yeah. For lack of a better term, the psychology of selling, where you led them in a psychological way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I don't remember that particular instance, but you're an honorable guy, and I know that it in fact happened. So. One thing I did learn, we talked about training, so if I can interject here quickly. So one of the training that I talked about initially was a guy named Jackie Cooper, and he was a sage old veteran, if you will, that had been everything, and he was a mentor to me, although I didn't get to work with him. I believed in, I could identify with his stories that he would tell. And he was a storyteller, if you will, not in the negative sense as in untruth, but telling happenings. So one of the things he shared with me that I never forgot, and I always tried to remember, was there are two parts of a sale. One is a mental sale, and the other is a financial sale. So what his philosophy was, and I believed it and still used it for all my years in business, was people will never make a financial sale. That is to say, they will never sign until they own the car mentally. The mental sale part of it. So, and the mental sale part of it can happen by you imparting your words to them with, silly little questions that create ideas in their mind. Maybe something like, will this car fit in your garage, or who are you going to show this car off to, Mr. Jones, or who's the very first person that you're going to take for a ride in your new car. So once you, and then the customer, when they hear that, they go for a little mental ride, if you will, about who they're going to show it to. And then at that point, once you've accomplished that, whether they do it themselves or you do that for them, then they will ultimately be compelled to buy, hopefully, if everything is right. So anyway, it was incredibly eye-opening to me, and until you see it happen.
It's kind of like the emotion side and the logic side. You use about 5% logic,
that's exactly,
and 95% emotion, and
that's exactly what it is.
I think that's one of the people in our past. I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but somebody said that you have it's 5% logic and 95% emotion to purchasing a vehicle. So it's important that you get people to really get excited about the vehicle and stay off the numbers, because your closing should be a lot shorter. You should not spend very much time closing a deal, because the person should have already bought it.
I agree. in today's market, that is to say, most of the people do all their shopping, as we all know, online, on phone, mobile, tablet, whatever they want to use. So they're already further down the funnel of purchasing than we ever were back when you and I sold together.
Right.
So that mental part of the sale is even more critical now because they're already close to that financial decision. So now we have to just get them to own it mentally, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and get excited about something because
Exactly.
they it's almost like they're spending more time in the logic side to where they're
Exactly.
they're got it like analysis by paralysis, and they've forgotten how exciting it is to get a new car.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Really, a powerful demonstration of the vehicle can cement the deal in a lot of cases, really. And you were always excellent at that, really.
Well, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and I truly do believe that's a lost art. Is like a walk around presentation,
It exactly is.
tailored to the person, not like we used to do, where you start at the headlights and
Yeah.
I mean, that's just regurgitating information, but something where you've actually reached in and you've identified with the client and you know
Exactly.
what they're looking for and you tailor it to what their needs
Exactly.
are.
What's the most important to you about this new car that you'd like to get?
Yes.
And they'll
yeah.
tell you, and then you tailor your presentation around that, of course.
Right, exactly. So, in your opinion, Gene, you've been around the industry for a long time, and in your opinion, what do you feel like is one of the biggest threats to this industry today, to its success?
You know what? I think it would be ourselves, really. What I mean when I say that is our business is ever changing, right? Unless if we're reluctant to change with the times, and obviously the most obvious reference of that would be Amazon. It's if we don't make it easier for the customer, make it an enjoyable experience, earn a 5-star Google review. If we don't do all the right things, then we will in fact be extinct one day. Amazon buys a dealership somewhere somehow, and they start selling the cars online, doing it right. They'll struggle. I mean, many people have tried to come along and we're going to show these car people how to do it right.
Right.
And a lot of them had failed miserably. But
Even the manufacturer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mostly the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So our biggest threat is ourselves and are reluctant to change. I really believe that to be true.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. We have to keep our minds open. You never want to change just to change.
Right.
However, the world is changing, and I do think that there's benefit in a highly trained salesperson.
I think so.
I don't think that'll ever go away with a car because it is an emotional experience.
It really is.
People rarely buy a car because they need one. I mean, we get 3 and 4 year old cars that are traded in with 50 and 60,000 miles on them. Nobody needs to trade that car in. They could drive that car. There's no issue there.
Right.
But they buy because they want
Exactly.
it, and they're trying to cure a pain point.
Exactly, and they're trying to fulfill that ego, the little trip that we talked about. They can't wait to show their new car to, their friend or their associate at work or something. They're searching for something, and as you said, they don't need a car, but they want a car. They want to recapture that feeling again, whatever it was.
Well, and we live in a now society. So there's a guy that is, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of him, but anyway, he's the #1 car salesperson now. He beat Joe Girard 2 years ago. In 2017, he knocked off Joe Girard as the world's greatest salesman.
Is that Gene Mullins?
I'd love to say it was Gene Mullins,
It
but
wasn't.
I think he sold 1,572 cars, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh
I could be off a little bit. Don't bang me, Allie, if if I'm off. But anyway, I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing. But he's up in Detroit, and he believes in the dead at midnight principle, which which is what I bring into my classes and what I subscribe to. It's on the back of my cards. It's Og Mandino's rule number 10, which is beginning today, greet everyone you meet, friend or foe, loved one or stranger, as if they're going to be dead by midnight, and extend to them, no matter how trivial the contact, all the care, kindness, understanding, and love you can muster, and do so with no thought of any reward. Your life will never be the same again.
Wow.
So Ali believes in that, and the reason why he's been so successful, he attributes it to that principle, because he believes that if somebody walks through the door, the one thing that they don't want to do is be at a car dealership. The other thing they don't want is to talk to a car salesperson. So they have to overcome a lot of discomfort just to walk through the door to buy a car. And if they overcome that discomfort, then they have no interest in overcoming it again by going someplace else, and they don't want to overcome it again by coming back and picking up their car.
Yeah.
So he looks at every person as if they walk through the door with a pain point, some reason that they want to cure this pain point with the right vehicle. He finds the right vehicle for them and makes sure that they go in it that day because, hey, Armageddon could happen at midnight, right?
Time is death to the deal. Right?
Time is death to the deal, yes. Yes. So, Gene, in your opinion, how important is training?
You know, I alluded to it or referred to it directly a few earlier in this video, but until I made my decision that I'm in the business, I'm going to be the best that I can be. Now it was a matter of how am I going to get there? What am I going to do to get better? We can watch and learn through Joe, who's leading our board, right? And we can take the knowledge that he or she has gained and use that. But also, I'd rather learn from the people who have had the most success and can impart the best knowledge to you. So training is absolutely critical. It's the number one most important thing that there is. I'll share this information with you too. So I've been in this position for not quite 3 years. But prior to that, we had some consolidation in our dealerships, and I was asked to go to Fairfield Volkswagen. Prior to that, I was with our Ford store. But being the general sales manager, what I did every day, I have a thumb drive, and I have it on my phone. I have Grant Cardone, and every day I would listen to it till I was absolutely sick of it. But you know what? At the critical moment when I was with a customer, I could just say it. It was like, they say this, I say. They say, I say.
Yes. Yes.
So,
that takes practice, doesn't it?
It does. And you know what? I would never practice. I was never one to look at myself in the mirror and practice it, but I listened to it so many times that, today when I hear the salespeople will come to me and say, well, he just wants to think about it. Boom, boom, boom. I had like 3 or 4 answers. So it was just absolutely critical to my success, not only as a salesperson, but even more so as a manager.
Yeah.
So.
I could always see in Gene's face when he'd go in on a turn on one of my clients that if they actually, if he got him on the first, if they threw out an objection, he knocked down the objection and they went ahead and signed, his face almost just kind of dropped like, oh man, come on, give me some more.
Is that what you got?
Yeah, because he was always looking, he was kind of disappointed. And then as I got better, it was kind of funny because he would get 3 or 4 down and be like, wow, it took me 3 or 4 to get those people close, so you're doing a lot better.
So. Yeah, again, it illustrates the point that, when you're talking to customers and customers really rarely do when they're in the environment of, in a closing situation, they rarely say what they actually mean. They say this, they actually meant that. I'm not buying today means you're not giving me enough for my trade, or it may mean 3 or 4 other things. So our job as sales professionals are, what's the core of this issue? What is really the issue here? And sometimes we have to be not confrontational, but we have to be a little more bold in how we ask the people. Like, folks, you're here, I'm here. Can we come to some understanding? What's the real issue here?
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to say it in a different way. And then you may be wrong. They could say, you know what, I'm out of here. I wish I could say it was nice meeting you, Gene, but it wasn't. Or you could discover that, what the real core of the problem was.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things I like to say to clients is, Gene, the hardest part of getting what you want is really just making a decision.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. No matter what it is, and I can assure you that you're making a good decision.
Yeah.
I can assure you that based on the information you've given me today, you're making a good decision.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's always one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, people want to be reassured, even after they buy it. It's like, oh my gosh, I go home and
it's a big investment.
What did I do here?
Yeah.
That's why we have to get them delivered.
How much is my payment again? Gene, if you were starting today, if you could rewind just a few years, and you were starting today, you were a young man, you're getting in the car business, and you were starting today, what steps would you take to ensure your success?
Well, the obvious, which would be, adopt, accept, and approve of what you do as a professional.
Yes.
Secondly is just a lifelong sense of training. I think those are the 2 most critical things. First, you have to make the first and most important decision that, hey, you're in the business, you're going to be the best at it, and you're going to continue to learn all your lives. So if you really think about it, I mean, if we go to a doctor, for instance, or some other professional, do we really want to go somewhere and visit a doctor who's maybe earned his degree in 1980 that hasn't been back to learn the latest procedures lately? Probably not. Right? Or if we went to an eye doctor and he's got those old things that they, click around and move, do we really want to be there? We want to work with professionals, and we want to be the highest trained. And when we talk about training, the objections will change over time. I saw it on the internet. Edmonds told me this. Kelly Blue Book says this. So if we don't have any answers, we're going to lose.
Yeah.
So we need to have professional answers and word tracks to those challenges that we face daily.
I couldn't agree with you more. And things do change, but the more they change, it seems the more they stay the same, really.
Yeah,
because
exactly. So embrace the change. Change is good. And there's going to be more change coming your way. So
yes,
learn to like it.
Yeah,
Accept it.
Absolutely. So, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to tell everybody?
You know what? So Andy has asked me a lot of stuff and kind of put me on the spot here. But the truth is, when I started working with Andy, I saw a lot of potential. I saw a very honorable guy that maybe had some questions about the business that he was in. Do I really want to be here? So he was kind of a project, if you will, for me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to just share him all the knowledge that I have, and I'm going to not just tell him what to do, but show him how to do it in a proper and honorable fashion. And I could say about Andy, for all those years, he never really did anything untoward. He never did anything improper, illegal, or dishonorable. He was always a straight up guy who was a top performer at our store. So very proud of what you've accomplished as well.
Well, thank you, Gene, and
You're welcome.
I appreciate your guidance. Honestly, everybody throughout the years, if you're in the car business for any length of time, you have certain people that really leave an impression on you, and it's usually not just one. People will say, "Well, who was the person that left an impression?" Well, there was you. There's Doug Weldy. There's Tim Thiemann. There's Jerry Mullins. There's quite a few people that have left an impression on me for the good. But it's not often that you get to sit down with somebody who's your mentor and share that with them. Let them know how much you mean.
Well, thank you for that.
And also, get some of that wisdom imparted to other people, because I try to pass it on. But I'm still not Gene Mullins, so you still got stuff in your brain that comes through that I've forgotten, and then I've got things to add on. So I really appreciate your time today, Gene, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good
thank
to
you.
see you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you've gotten something out of this. I know it was a little bit of a long video, but I'll tell you what, if you went to the end of it, you probably got something out of this. So I really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time on myandybuck.com. Take care.
All the best.